Doctor Who has always been known for the show that has you hiding behind the sofa, but if there was one particular episode that had me terrified, it was 1968's Fury from the Deep. This now 52-year-old serial was recently animated, and everyone and their dogs, including myself, has watched this story. If you've been on the channel for a while, you know I'm slightly apprehensive towards the recent animations. In short, I'm a bit of an old-timer and therefore prefer the reconstructions, which is how I experienced this story upon my rewatch. I've always loved this story ever since I first saw it, but I've just seemed to grow fonder of it in recent years. I've only just come to realise how clever this episode is. Utilising something so everyday and mundane as seaweed and turning it into a monster is just genius. It really hits home the realism for the viewer. It makes you think this could be happening at your nearest beach, especially when the beach where this episode was actually filmed was the one I used to visit as a child. Fury from the Deep was written by Victor Pemberton, who was no stranger to Doctor Who. He'd previously worked on multiple productions, become a script editor for a short while, and even played a minor role in the Moonbase the year before. Initially, Pemberton submitted an outline for a story called The Slide in 1964, but it was turned down by David Whittaker, who claimed it was not right for Doctor Who. Pemberton had also sent it to BBC Light Radio and had already been accepted and commissioned by Peter Bryant. The Slide experimented with the concepts of sentient mud taking over the world and featured none other than Roger Delgado as one of the main roles. This audio drama can still be heard on Disc 3 of the new DVD release. In November 1967, Pemberton submitted a script for a story entitled The Colony of Devils. This story would later become Fury from the Deep, after some slight controversy with using the word devil in the title, despite a few years later the story The Sea Devils being made. The episode opens with a shot of the TARDIS landing on the sea. The intended idea was to have the TARDIS land on a cliff. However, director Hugh David decided to try something slightly different and more ambitious on the day, having a smaller prop of the TARDIS being lowered into the sea from a helicopter using a piano wire. This shot was later reused in the War Games the following year, hence how the full clip can be seen. The Doctor, Jamie and Victoria all row ashore in a rubber dinghy, only to find an immense amount of foam building up on the shore. The Doctor and Co make their way over to a gas pipe to hear a strange noise coming from inside that resembles a heartbeat. It's in this scene in which we get our first appearance of Doctor Who's favourite Deus Ex Machina, the sonic screwdriver.
Oh, well, have to use this. What's that? It's a sonic screwdriver. Never fails. There we are. Neat, isn't it? All done by sound waves.
However, it's slightly more complicated than that. The script stated that the Doctor takes something from his pocket that looks like his own version of a screwdriver, but it was production assistant Michael Bryan who suggested the idea of a sonic screwdriver. Production photos show that Troughton was using a prop very reminiscent of a normal screwdriver. However, if photos taken during filming the scene, he can be seen using the whistle from his life jacket. Perhaps Troughton lost the screwdriver when it came around to filming the final shot, so he just decided to use the life jacket whistle. Either way, it's a nice introduction to a quintessential part of the show. Seen tampering with the pipeline on the beach, the Doctor, Jamie and Victoria are shot down by someone watching from above. When they awake, they find themselves surrounded by a crew inside the Eurosea gas refinery and are introduced to the head of the said refinery, John Robson. Robson is a perfect Doctor Who villain. He channels that truly menacing, power-crazed anti-hero role, always shouting at people and never using their names. He spends the majority of the episode under the control of the seaweed creature, so we'd only get to see him for his true self towards the end. The line didn't make it into the final cut, however the target book states that Robson had lost his wife in a car crash 22 years prior to the story. This just adds a whole new layer to the character. This story is quite possibly one of Doctor Who's darkest, but you just have to look for it.
You all want? You're going to get at me just so I'll give up? I'm not going to give you that pleasure. Why don't you go and join him? Go and join Ben Lutyens! Go and join him! What are you standing around for? What are you staring at? I'm in charge! I'm in charge here!
Meanwhile, Maggie Harris, the wife of Frank, the second in command to Robson, has found a strange sort of seaweed in her room. After touching it and getting stung, she begins to feel strange effects. Having disposed of the weed by throwing it out the window, it begins to pulsate and grow on the patio, slowly producing a mass of foam. The foam is definitely one of the most memorable parts of the story, in fact of the entire Troughton era. It was definitely an ambitious move from the production team, but it paid off well. The first episode ends with Victoria finding herself locked in a room, slowly filling with gas and foam through the air vent. This is a terrifying cliffhanger that leaves you genuinely curious as to how she's going to get out of it. Speaking of which, this is a great story for Victoria. In fact, I'd say her best. As her exit story, you really do get a sense of her love for travelling with the Doctor beginning to decay. Deborah Watling as Victoria has always been one of my favourite companions, and it's just great to see her leave on such a high. Fraser Hines is fantastic as always and gels perfectly alongside Troughton with their little improvised lines and quirks. Part 2 picks up with Maggie's conditioning worsening and the introduction of Mr. Oak and Mr. Quill. Two of Doctor Who's creepiest characters, two comical, sadistic figures silent throughout and just looming in the background of each shot. Then we get the infamous gassing scene, which features one of the most eerie shots in Doctor Who history. The sound design on this episode is perfect. It works equally as well as an audio drama because of this. The heartbeat building up every time the creature appears, the atmospheric score from Dudley Simpson building in moments of tension just makes this episode. The Doctor, Jamie and Victoria return to the TARDIS to do experiments on the strange seaweed, only to find out that it's alive, and the pulsating rhythm heard from the pipes was its heartbeat. One terrifying cliffhanger after another, episode 3 ends with another eerie shot of the silhouette of Robson watching Maggie slowly walk into the ocean, both under the influence of the weed. Episode 4 continues with tensions rising among the base. The story is very slow paced, spanning across 6 episodes, however this does not affect my enjoyment of it whatsoever. It's a great way of slowly building tension and slowly easing the climax across parts 5 and 6. We are once again given yet another terrifying shot, this time of engineer Van Lutyens being dragged down an elevator shaft by the weed creature. The Doctor soon works out that the seaweed is growing from a nerve centre located at the centre of the oil rigs, but it's too late. The creature has broken its way into the base, and to make things worse, Victoria has been kidnapped by Robson in a helicopter. This sequence features immensely dangerous helicopter stunts performed by Mike Smith, which included flying a helicopter between the legs of the Red Sand Sea Forts with about 5 foot leeway each side. This was completely illegal, but a massive adrenaline boost for the stunt pilot, who when he got back to his hotel later that evening proceeded to get completely wasted, eat a wine glass, and attempted to swing from the chandelier, proceeding to fall down the ceiling on top of himself and going through a table. Back at the Eurosea gas refinery, the Doctor has discovered that the seaweed creature's weakness is high-pitched sound, and therefore gets Victoria to scream into a tape recorder and play it back at a higher pitch and amplitude down the pipeline, therefore killing the monster for good. Thankfully, an alternative take of this scene exists, so we do get to see it in its full glory. A surge of foam is released into the main control room as the weed creature writhes about. This scene is what's perfect about this episode. The Doctor is fighting bubbles. It shouldn't be scary, but it is. This goes to show Pemberton's pure inane genius and the efforts of the production team who brought this idea to life. After the creature has been defeated, we get a beautiful goodbye scene for Victoria as she decides to stay on Earth with the Harrises. Jamie shows his annoyance at her decision, and the episode is left with a heartfelt line. Such a way to wrap up an episode that I can't think of how other to describe than perfect.
I was fond of her too, you know, Jamie.